In the year 2479, Earth had grown quiet. Cities stretched across continents with clean air, peaceful streets, and skies free of warships. The last great interstellar conflict had ended more than a century ago, and humanity, once fierce in battle, had turned inward, choosing exploration, trade, and peace. Defense systems were reduced. Fleets were decommissioned. Earth became a small, neutral world in a galaxy ruled by distant empires. No one expected the sky to fall. It began with shadows. One morning, as the sun rose over the eastern seaboard, the sky dimmed. Not from clouds or storms, but from ships, massive alien vessels, so large they blocked the light. They came in silence, drifting into Earth's orbit like a black tide. One by one, they positioned themselves above major cities, spaceports, and communication hubs. The world paused. News feeds flickered to life, showing the same sight everywhere. Earth, surrounded. The fleet belonged to the Galactic Empire of Varnak, a name few on Earth even knew. To the wider galaxy, Varnak was feared, an empire built on conquest, spreading slowly, planet by planet. But Earth had always been far from its path. Until now. At exactly 0800 UTC, a signal was broadcast across all frequencies. It was not in any known Earth language, but the translation came almost instantly. People of Earth. You are now under the domain of the Varnak Empire. Surrender within 72 of your Earth hours, or be erased. Resistance will bring fire. Submission will bring order. The message repeated once, then vanished. Panic rippled through the population. Military leaders met behind closed doors. Earth's defense systems, outdated orbital cannons, and a handful of automated satellites were quietly assessed. They stood no chance. The alien fleet stretched across the sky like a net. It was not an attack, it was a warning. Some people prayed. Others packed and fled into underground shelters. Many simply stared at the sky, their mouths open in silence. And far beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a quiet research base off the Mariana Trench, Commander Jackson Morrow sat alone, watching the news from a screen mounted to the wall. He had once stood on the bridge of a starship, leading fleets across distant systems. He had worn medals, spoken at memorials, and lived through war. But he had stepped away from all of it after the Battle of Alarigate, where a decision he made led to the deaths of his entire crew. Since then, he had lived in the quiet, repairing underwater research drones, studying ocean currents, pretending the sky would never call him again. Now, the sky was calling. He stood slowly, the room bathed in blue from the deep ocean light outside the window. His hands curled into fists. He didn't know yet what he could do. He didn't know if Earth even had a chance. But something inside him stirred. Something old and unforgotten. Across the screen, the Varnak ships held their positions. Silent. Waiting. Time was ticking. The ocean was Earth's last quiet place. Miles below the surface, away from fear, news, and alien fleets, the world was still and cold. Light faded into darkness, swallowed by the deep. And far beneath the Pacific, buried under layers of rock and steel, was something forgotten. Commander Jackson Morrow arrived at Pacific Deep Station 7 by sub-shuttle that evening. The base floated near the Mariana Trench, tethered to the seabed like a steel jellyfish. It was small, old, and silent. No one had used it for military purposes in decades. These days, it housed ocean sensors and boring machines, not weapons. Jackson was greeted by Dr. Hannah Kess, lead technician of the station. She looked tired, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "We picked up something strange," she said, leading him through dim corridors. A power surge, strong, old tech. Then, it went quiet again. Jackson followed her in silence. He had heard the signal too. It was faint, buried in background noise, but unmistakable, an old human fleet command frequency. The kind no one had used in over 100 years. "We've never seen anything like it," Hannah continued. "It's coming from the trench wall. Deep. Very deep." They entered the control room. Screens showed sonar scans and energy patterns. One stood out, a perfect shape buried beneath thousands of feet of ocean and rock. It wasn't natural. It wasn't part of the seabed. It was a structure. Jackson stared at it. His voice came out low and certain. "That's not a base. That's a ship." Silence followed. He reached into a compartment of his jacket and pulled out an old data chip. It was scratched and faded, but it held something most had forgotten: schematics of experimental vessels built during the last Galactic War. One of them matched the sonar image. The Leviathan, he said. It was a myth. A warship so powerful they buried it. No records of anything like that exist in public systems, Hannah said. Why would they hide it? Because it scared even us, Jackson replied. And because we swore never to build one again. Hannah studied the scan, her voice now quiet. If this thing is real, and if it still works, it might be the only thing we have that could stand against the Varnak. Jackson looked at her. He saw the doubt in her eyes, the fear. But beneath it, he saw something else too. Hope. They took a small submersible the next day. It dove deep into the trench, past crushing pressures and ancient silence. Lights flickered through the dark water. Faint outlines emerged. Metal beams, reinforced hull plating, massive weapons arrays. The ship was still intact, anchored into the trench wall like a sleeping giant. Its hull bore a faded nameplate, half covered in silt and coral. HFY Leviathan. The ship pulsed, faintly, with power. Some systems were still alive. As they approached, the subsystems went haywire, sensors scrambled, lights dimmed. Then, as if recognizing them, the Leviathan opened. A massive hangar bay slowly parted, ancient engines stirring with a low hum. The sub drifted inside, swallowed by the ship's interior. Lights flickered on across the ceiling. Automated lights. Emergency power. Standby mode. It had been waiting. Inside, Jackson stepped onto the hangar deck, his boots clanging against old steel. The air was dry, breathable. Emergency systems were still maintaining life support. The ship had been sealed, protected, preserved. They explored in silence. Rusted consoles, worn-down walls, and thick cables lined the corridors. The ship was massive, 10 times the size of any modern warship. Its core was buried in armor. Its weapons had been sealed away. And deep in the command chamber, beneath layers of forgotten security codes, Jackson found the ship's heart. An artificial intelligence core. Flickering. Damaged. But aware. A screen buzzed to life. A voice, slow and distorted, spoke. Commander, recognized. Identity match. Morrow, Jackson. Access level. Provisional. Welcome aboard, sir. Jackson took a breath. He had not been called commander in years. Behind him, Hannah looked around the dark control room. Can it fight? Jackson stared at the flickering consoles, the dormant systems, the blinking lights trying to come alive. I don't know, he said. But we're going to find out. He looked up at the stars through a small viewing port. They were distant and cold, and filled now with enemy ships. The clock was ticking. Earth had little time left. And the Leviathan had just begun to wake. The Leviathan slept no longer. Power surged through its veins like blood returning to a heart long stopped. Lights flickered on across its vast corridors. Engines hummed in their cradles. Control panels blinked with data, slowly restoring from deep memory banks. Yet the ship was far from ready. Commander Jackson Morrow stood in the command center, his eyes scanning the dim displays. He had walked these halls in his imagination before. As a young officer, he had read secret reports, studied declassified war designs, and wondered what it would feel like to command a ship that could fight entire fleets alone. Now that he stood here, inside the belly of a war machine that was never meant to be used, he felt none of the excitement he once imagined. He felt weight, history, guilt. Hannah Kess worked quietly beside him, linking portable systems into the ship's damaged network. Sparks hissed from old circuits. Dust fell from the ceiling as air vents struggled to clear a century of silence. I've restored partial control to navigation and life support, she said, fingers flying across her tablet. Weapons and propulsion are locked down by old command codes. In the AI, it's unstable. Jackson nodded. He had expected as much. How long to get the core online? I don't know, she replied. It's not just damaged. It's confused. The AI doesn't know what year it is. It thinks the war is still happening. Jackson stepped toward the main console. A thin layer of frost coated the edges of the screen. He wiped it clean. The ship responded, sluggish, but alert. A voice came through the intercom. Broken. Machine-like. Female. Fleet Command Authority. Required. Protocol standby mode engaged. Multiple system errors detected. Awaiting input. I need full access, Jackson said firmly, speaking toward the console. Identity confirmed. Jackson Morrow. Fleet Commander, Earth Defense Protocol. Clearance level, Beta 7. Access, limited. Recommend, reinstatement protocol. He paused. Begin reinstatement. Please confirm. You accept command of HFY Leviathan? He hesitated. His reflection stared back at him from the dark screen. And behind that reflection lived a memory. The Battle of Alara Gate. Years ago. Jackson's last command. A surprise ambush by raiders on a civilian convoy. He had been forced to make a call, engage the enemy head-on, or protect the evac ships and risk his own destruction. He chose to protect the civilians. He saved hundreds of lives. But his own ship, the Emberlight, was destroyed. Every crew member except him perished. He survived in a broken escape pod, alone, drifting for days. He never took another command again. Until now. Yes, Jackson said quietly. I accept command. The ship responded instantly. Command reinstated. Welcome back, Commander Morrow. Lights across the bridge lit up. Systems rebooted in sequence. Shields, sensors, reactor control, everything began to wake. Hannah looked over. That was fast. Military tradition, Jackson replied. If you can speak, and you're still breathing, you're still in command. They both allowed a small smile. But it didn't last. A warning light flashed red. One of the outer sensors had come online. Hannah tapped into the feed. We've got movement. Above. A small Varnak scout ship hovered over the ocean, scanning. It had likely picked up the sudden energy spike from the Leviathan. They're looking for us, Jackson said. If they find the ship before we're ready, they'll destroy it, Hannah finished. And us with it. Jackson's mind began to work. We need shielding online. And we need to keep the Leviathan buried as long as possible. I can mask the energy signature. It won't hold forever, but it'll buy us time. Do it. He turned back to the command console. The AI was stabilizing, still glitchy, but learning. He knew what that meant. They could teach it, direct it. And maybe, just maybe, they could make it fight again. He opened a secure channel, something hidden deep in old fleet networks. He hoped the code still worked. This is Commander Jackson Morrow. If you're receiving this, I need engineers, pilots, and anyone who served in the Outer Ring campaigns. Report quietly. Come alone. We are not done yet. He ended the message and stood still. He had just committed an act of open defiance. Earth's leaders wouldn't like it. They were still trying to negotiate with the Varnak, still hoping surrender might spare lives. But Jackson knew better. He had seen how empires operated. The Varnak wouldn't spare Earth. They would take it, strip it, control it, and erase anything that resisted. They didn't fear Earth. But they didn't know about the Leviathan. Not yet. Jackson looked around the cold steel of the bridge and felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders once more. The ghosts of his past were still here. But now, so was a chance at redemption. The world above trembled. Cities watched the skies in silence, counting the hours. News stations played the same message over and over again. The Empire of Varnak had given Earth 72 hours to surrender. By now, only 12 remained. Earth's leaders met in secret chambers, still hoping for peace. They sent signals to the Varnak fleet, pleas for negotiation, offers of tribute, silence in return. The enemy would not speak again. They had already made their terms clear. Below the ocean, in the deep trench, something old and powerful stirred. The Leviathan was no longer sleeping. Commander Jackson Morrow stood on the bridge, surrounded by glowing screens and low, steady hums of reactivated systems. The ship was still damaged, still incomplete, but it lived now. Systems were coming online. Power was flowing through its engines. The AI was stabilizing. Over the past 2 days, small teams had arrived, veteran engineers, old fleet officers, and rogue programmers who had heard Jackson's hidden signal. Some had come in secret. Others brought ancient tools and rare components. They worked quietly and quickly, patching systems, linking old circuits, speaking in hushed voices. They all knew what was at stake. Still, the ship was not ready. Its weapons were offline. Its main reactor was unstable. Its outer hull was cracked in places. But it had one advantage: surprise. Jackson stood over a console as the AI's voice echoed through the chamber. Core stability at 62%. Navigation operational. Structural integrity at 74%. Tactical systems, incomplete. Hannah, standing at his side, looked at the readings. We can launch, but we won't last long in combat. We won't fight yet, Jackson said. First, we make them see us. A sharp alert rang through the ship. Varnak patrol ships, 3 of them, were approaching the trench. Scouting. Searching. They had detected the faint energy signals, even masked. Time was up. They'll find us soon, Hannah said. They're too close. Jackson's voice was calm. Then we rise now. He stepped forward and gave the command. Begin launch sequence. Prepare for surface breach. The Leviathan rumbled. Deep thrusters warned for the first time in over a century. Sea pressure fought against its frame, but the ship held firm. Outer clamps disengaged. Anchors snapped free. Water flooded out of the hangars as the ship pushed upward, slow at first, then faster. The ocean churned above. On the surface, civilian ships saw the first sign, a bubbling swirl, growing wider. Waves crashed in every direction as the sea lifted unnaturally. Birds scattered. A bright blue light burst from beneath, and then the Leviathan broke the surface. A mountain of metal, gleaming with age and power. Water rolled off its hull like rain from a storm cloud. The skies above lit up with its engines. Across Earth, satellite feeds picked it up immediately. Screens in homes, offices, and war rooms showed the same image, a massive human warship, rising from the ocean like a ghost from the past. People stopped and stared. Some cheered. Others whispered. A few simply cried. In orbit, the Varnak fleet reacted. Patrols turned. Scanners focused. The alien commanders watched in silence as a ship they didn't know, one they hadn't accounted for, entered the sky. The Leviathan climbed higher, rising past the clouds, through the upper atmosphere, and into space. For the first time in generations, a human warship stood before the enemy. On the bridge, Jackson sat in the captain's chair. The crew around him moved quickly, activating shields, stabilizing systems. Warnings lit up the screens: low power, incomplete armor, weapons not responding. He didn't care. Broadcast a message, he said. The AI responded. Channel open. Jackson leaned forward, speaking clearly, without fear. This is Commander Jackson Morrow of the UHS Leviathan. You have made a mistake coming here. He ended the transmission. A pause. Then movement. The Varnak fleet began to shift. Not fire, not yet, but adjust. Scanning. Tracking. They were surprised. Curious. Maybe even cautious. And that was enough. Hannah turned to him. We're not strong enough to fight them. Not yet. I know, Jackson said. But now they know Earth isn't helpless. The ship floated between the planet and the fleet, a silent guardian, still broken, still healing, but awake. Earth's people looked up and saw it shining above. Hope spread through the world like fire in dry grass. In the command center, Jackson closed his eyes for a moment. He could still feel the weight of the past, the ghosts of his lost crew. But now, something new stirred in his chest, not guilt, not pain. Purpose. He opened his eyes. This was only the beginning. The stars above Earth were no longer silent. The Varnak Empire's fleet moved slowly, forming a wide ring around the planet. Their ships were dark, sharp-edged, and endless in number. Each one carried weapons powerful enough to level cities. Now, they all turned their attention toward a single object in orbit. The Leviathan. Commander Jackson Morrow stood tall on the bridge. Around him, the ship hummed and trembled. Warning lights flashed across control panels. Damage reports came in one after another. The ship was not ready. And yet, it had to fly. Jackson stared at the approaching ships. The Varnak were testing them, sending smaller units first, scout ships, probe carriers, then light destroyers. They wanted to measure the threat. They still didn't know what the Leviathan was capable of. And that gave him time. Status, he called out. Hanakes, bent over a console, didn't look up. Shields are weak. Weapons are at 30%. Hull is holding, barely. Power core's unstable. We can't take a direct hit. Jackson nodded. He wasn't surprised. Target the nearest scout ship, he ordered. Single shot. Let them know we can bite. The tactical officer hesitated, then locked in coordinates. A few seconds later, the Leviathan's forward cannon fired. A beam of white-hot energy cut through space like a blade. It struck the Varnak scout at the center and split it in half. Debris floated silently. Earth watched. The Varnak fleet paused. For the first time in hours, the enemy hesitated. They had not expected the ancient warship to move, much less fight. They now realized this was not a museum piece. It was a weapon. But hesitation didn't last long. 5 destroyers peeled off from the outer line and rushed the Leviathan. Missiles screamed through the black. Energy cannons lit up like lightning. Jackson gave his orders calmly. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire, prioritize engines and sensors. No kill shots unless necessary. But a young officer began. We're not here to win this battle, Jackson said. We're here to show them Earth won't go quietly. The ship shook violently as the first blast struck its side. Sparks flew from ceiling panels. Crews stumbled. Systems flickered. Still, the Leviathan held. Its rear cannons fired, knocking out one destroyer's power. Another ship spun out of control as its engine pod exploded. The Leviathan's shields dropped to 12%. In the command chair, Jackson gripped the armrests. His voice stayed firm. Redirect power from life support to defense grid. I want every bolt holding. but that'll cut atmosphere to lower decks. Then seal them. Now, down in engineering, Hannah worked fast. Her hands were cut and blistered, but she kept moving. If the reactor failed, the Leviathan would become a floating coffin. She linked old systems with makeshift cables, shouting over the alarm sirens. We're losing pressure in Sector 4. Seal it off. Heat surge in the primary core. Redirect it to the ballast tanks. Suddenly, an alert pinged on her console. Incoming transmissions, but not from Earth. Jackson's voice came through the speaker. Talk to me, Hannah. She stared at the data. We're getting a message from outside the Varnak fleet. Source. She paused. A rebel ship. Non-human. They're broadcasting in an old Earth Alliance code. Jackson's eyes narrowed. Put them through. The screen lit up. An alien face appeared, gray skin, sharp eyes, battle-worn armor. He spoke in broken English. Human ship. We see your fight. We stand with Earth. More signals followed. 3 ships. Then 5. Then 10. Small, fast vessels, pirates, smugglers, outlaws. Enemies of Varnak. They had no fleet, no flag, but they had courage. Jackson smiled faintly. Tell them to hit the outer Varnak flank. Draw fire. We'll cover their approach. The battle shifted. Suddenly, the Leviathan was not alone. The rebel ships darted between the Varnak formation, drawing fire. Explosions lit the sky. The enemy line broke, even if only for a moment. That moment was all Jackson needed. Fire everything we have, he commanded. The Leviathan's main cannon glowed. Its last full power charge surged forward and hit the Varnak flagship's shield array. The impact didn't destroy it, but it cracked the shield, fractured it. For the first time, Syrinx, the High Warlord, felt threatened. In response, the enemy flagship began to retreat. Not far, just enough to regroup. But it was a sign. They were shaken. Inside the Leviathan, silence filled the bridge. The ship was damaged, engines overheated, shields down to nothing. Smoke filled the air. Crew were injured. Systems offline. But the enemy was falling back. Not in full retreat, but no longer advancing. Hannah arrived back on the bridge, covered in ash. That shot cost us almost everything, she said. We won't survive another attack. Jackson looked at the stars. They were quiet again for now. We weren't meant to survive this, he said softly. We were meant to buy time. Give Earth a reason to fight. He sat down. The Leviathan floated alone, bruised and burning, but still there. Still watching. Earth saw. The galaxy saw. And somewhere inside the silence, hope grew stronger. The stars were still burning. Pieces of shattered ships drifted slowly across Earth's orbit. Flames flickered out in the cold vacuum of space. The Varnak fleet, once spread wide like a dark wall, had pulled back. Not in defeat, yet not in victory either. For the first time in their long reign of conquest, the Varnak had hesitated. And all because of one ship. The Leviathan, scarred, cracked, and barely holding together, remained in orbit. Systems were down. Weapons offline. Life support was running on backup power. Inside, it was quiet. Commander Jackson Morrow stood on the darkened bridge, staring at Earth below. Its blues and greens shimmered beneath thin clouds. A peaceful planet. A home still standing. Behind him, Hannah Kess limped in, holding a report. Her face was pale, streaked with grease and blood. She handed it to Jackson without a word. He read it silently. Casualties. Damage. Power core near failure. Hull breach on Deck 7. Reactor cooling system unstable. Dozens injured. 2 dead. His hands tightened around the edge of the report. Still, they were alive. The door to the bridge slid open again. A young officer stepped forward, breathless. Commander. Varnak ships are falling back. Not just here across the system. Their whole formation is pulling out. They're retreating. Jackson didn't speak. He simply closed his eyes and let the words sink in. They weren't defeated. Not yet. But they were rattled. High Warlord Syrinx had miscalculated. He believed Earth was soft, easy to conquer. He hadn't expected resistance. He hadn't expected the Leviathan. And now, he would need to think twice before returning. Across Earth, crowds filled the streets. People watched the sky. They had seen it, through news feeds, through military broadcasts, through satellite footage. The ancient warship rising from the sea. The battle in orbit. The rebels arriving. The enemy falling back. A planet that had once feared the future now stood tall. In the hours that followed, Earth's global leaders reached out to Jackson. Messages poured in from all continents. Gratitude. Shock. Demands. Warnings. Some called him a hero. Others feared what he had done. Jackson answered none of them. He stood in the Leviathan's control chamber, looking at the AI's flickering interface. The voice, once broken and unstable, was now calm and steady. Damage report complete. Crew survival, 93%. Primary functions offline. Recommendation, full restoration protocol. Estimated time, unknown. Jackson placed a hand on the central console. "We'll repair," he said softly. "But the ship is no longer a secret. We keep it where the world can see it now. A warning to anyone who thinks Earth is defenseless." Acknowledged, Commander. Later, as repair crews arrived and engineers swarmed the ship, Jackson stood alone in the main hangar. He stared up at the ceiling, high above where the launch doors had first opened to the ocean. This was where it began. He remembered the silence of the trench, the weight of his decision, the ghosts of his past, whispering that he would fail again. But he didn't. He gave Earth a chance. Footsteps echoed behind him. Hannah walked up beside him, arms crossed, her jacket torn and soaked with coolant. "They're going to want you back in uniform," she said. "Medals. Speeches. Command." "I'm not interested," he replied. "You just saved the planet." "No," Jackson said. "We did. All of us. Everyone who showed up. Everyone who didn't run. Earth's not strong because of me. It's strong because people chose to rise." She didn't argue. They stood together in silence, watching repair teams work around them. Sparks flew. Welders patched metal. Technicians whispered over blinking consoles. The ship was breathing again, slowly, carefully. Finally, Jackson turned to leave. "What now?" Hannah asked. He paused. "We rebuild. We train. And we wait." "For what?" "For the day Syrinx returns." "And he will." Jackson stepped into the elevator, the doors closing behind him. 2 days later, the Leviathan was placed into geostationary orbit, above Earth's equator. Not hidden, not buried, not forgotten. It stood watch over the planet like a giant eye. A message was broadcast across the galaxy. From Earth. From its people. We are no longer alone. We are no longer silent. We will not kneel. Earth stands ready. And deep in the Leviathan's core, the AI spoke once more. "Commander Morrow, Earth stands because you chose to rise." He said nothing in return. He only looked to the stars where fire had once burned, and where peace, for now, had returned.